Welcome to the Balance Blueprints podcast, where we discuss the optimal techniques for finances and health, and then break it down to create an individualized and balanced plan. I'm your host, Justin Gaines, here with my co-host, John Prober. Because if you think about trying to save up $1 million, $2 million for retirement, that's a big number, and if you're at zero, that's way out of range. And so if you think about it from a standpoint of my financial fortress and stronghold is going to be built by little $5 bricks, now it starts to make a lot more sense, and you're more willing to say, oh, I can put $20 or $10 a week or out of every paycheck into savings. Well, now I'm placing 2 bricks into that wall instead of I'm only putting $10 and I'm trying to go to $1 million. Like, how's that going to happen?
Yeah. Those small incremental steps will be. We even talked about it with the New Year's resolutions. Like, you like to break it up into 3-month spans. Like, it just makes it that much more doable.
Right. Exactly. And it's one of those things that having the budget in the first place is going to be the hardest part. I mean, almost every single one of my initial client meetings, we sit down and we create a budget because most of my clients don't have a budget. They might know what they make. And oddly enough, we'll sit down, and part of that fact finding process is just saying, okay, what are your monthly expenses? And if you have a budget, you reel that number off. These are my household expenses. These are my entertainment expenses. This is, and break it down each category, and you know those numbers, and it's nice and easy. Or maybe you don't know them off the top of your head, but you can pull up your budget, look at it, and say, okay, this is what I'm doing, and we can look at those, and then 30 minutes of our meeting gets wiped off the board because it's clearly organized. Yeah. But more often than not, most individuals don't have that budget. And so we're sitting looking at a bank account or a bank statement and saying, okay, what's this line item? What's this line item? And just breaking it down. Because in order to get to a financial stronghold, you have to do what's called a $0 budget or a net zero budget, which just means that every single dollar is accounted for. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to look at, okay, take somebody who has take-home pay of easy round numbers, we'll say $4,000 a month. It's right around the national average income. They have $4,000 a month. They spend $1,000, and that's after taxes. They spend $1,000 a month on rent. You're at $3,000 now. And generally, that's a fairly good ratio for rent. 25% is a good ratio for your rent. But then how are all your other things? And what a lot of people will do is they'll say, oh, I have roughly $100 a week for groceries, call it $125 for round numbers, $500 a month for groceries, $100 a month for internet, $100 a month for electricity. And they start raffling off all these things. And as you total them up, you get to the bottom and there's a net difference, either positive or negative. And that's the result of winging it. And just trying to say, okay, I'm going to be in the rough ballpark and not having a job for every single one of your dollars. And that's the way the investor mindset starts to look at it, is you want to think of every single one of your dollar bills as individual employees for you. And every single paycheck, your employer gives you all these little employees. Now, you can either give them to somebody else to go to work, or you can have them go to work for yourself. And that's completely up to you. But what you don't want them doing is all hanging out around the water cooler, having a grand old time and not doing anything. And you don't want that dollar in your budget doing that either. You want to have everything down to a net zero so that everything has a job. And what that'll allow you to do is not make the excuses throughout the week if something's outside of your budget to then just go and do it. Because you're like, well, I know I have roughly a $200 window. And what typically happens with clients is they have, that roughly 2 to 5% window that's unaccounted for of their monthly expenses. And so say it's $200 and they're out with friends and they want to buy a couple extra drinks at the bar. So they say, I got extra $200 in my budget. No big deal. There's $40 after tip that they just spent. And then they're out with their girlfriend or boyfriend or significant other, and they do the same thing again. And then they're at the grocery store and they see something they really like and it's on sale. It's a good deal and it's an extra $50, but it's okay because I have a $200 window. Yeah. And they do that 5, 6, 7 times throughout the course of the month because they have a $200 buffer. So they're constantly rationalizing the small expenses that compound over time because they have this window in their budget that makes it acceptable. and it's just going into this miscellaneous expense unaccounted for amount. And ultimately what ends up happening is the amount that you allocate to that in your head ends up being larger than the amount of money that you actually have there to be allocated.
Yeah.
Versus if you keep track of everything and you say, right down to the dollar, this is going to investments, this is going to utilities, this is going to rent, food, phone bill, gas bill, car payment, whatever your expenses are. If you have it clearly outlined and everything has a job, you're not going to rationalize a poor expense. Now, what you can do is have a fund in there of $200, $300, whatever is appropriate for you for fun and entertainment. And then when you go out with your friends and you want to have those couple extra drinks, that's okay. But it goes into your funds and entertainment account, and track that and make sure that you're keeping track of how much is going out. Because that's the second part of the budget. Not only does it need to be net zero, you have to consistently look at it. You have to balance that budget every single paycheck or every single frequency that you determine in order to make sure that you're staying on budget. It doesn't just magically happen. Just because you've put together the equation that works for your finances doesn't mean that you're then going to spend that way. You need to balance it out. You need to make sense of it.
Yeah. With health journeys, becoming self-aware is like the most important thing you can do. There's no detail too small to track in terms of, I think the easiest correlation for me is, I like to have people keep diaries, logs of certain things they're doing, symptoms, what time you did this, what time, because like you said, recall of people, whether they're recalling healthy habits or they're just guesstimating their budget, it's terrible. I mean, you say, well, yeah, I think maybe I only went to bed, past like midnight once this week. Well, then you have people track and they're like, oh crap, like I went to bed past midnight about, 5 times this week. So it's so important to actually make sustainable changes. And I get it. It's tedious at first. But it's for the people that when you get to a point where you're like, okay, I really want change. I really want to start saving. I really want to be in a different financial position than I am now, a different health position than I am now. It's so important to just become self-aware and just keep checking with yourself and your finances.
For sure. And it gets you that freedom because it's going to decrease the stress burden on you. So it's going to allow you to then say, I know I spend roughly $50 a week on gas, and I only spent $40 this week, and I see something I want that's $10 in a different category of my budget. You go spend it. You don't worry about it because that $10 I'm borrowing from the gas budget, and I know that I'm not going to be over budget. And it allows you, even if you get off track, say that you see something that you really like and you really want it and you got to have it now. So you buy it and you're $50 over budget. Well, now when you go into next month or when you sit down the next pay period and you look at your budget, you can say, okay, I spent an extra $50 here and I was over by 50. Let me now decrease my spending somewhere else. Maybe that's taking one night that you were going to go out with friends and not going out that night, and making that adjustment there because you wanted something else. Wanting something else isn't the issue. It's wanting something else and thinking that you can have both worlds and both things consistently over a long period of time. That's what's going to deplete your financial stronghold.
Right. It's definitely a give and take. And I think what you just said, brought something up in my mind too, is the situation you're in and the responsibilities you have also make a huge difference. Because at first it might sound like create this budget, never go over it. But you just brought up a good point of like, okay, if you're in a situation where you go over this month, you can make up for it next month by not going out with your friends. Perfect. Make those little sacrifices here and there. If someone's in a situation though where they got mouths to feed or something else, it's like every situation is different on how strict you can be.
Correct. So and how you build out the budget and where your wiggle room is.
Yeah.
A lot of times you could, with your grocery budget, my grocery budget for our household is $200 every week.
Mm-hmm.
And consistently we are under that budget because $200 every week is the budget for us if we don't go out at all.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we have days that we go out, so we budget off of.
Wait, is your grocery bill and restaurant like going out? Or you lump those separate? Okay.
Separated. Yeah. Yep. So they're separated. So $200 is for groceries at the house, staying in. And then we have each, I think both of ours is different on this. I believe our numbers are different, but for me, it's roughly $100 for going out. in meals each week. Now, that number's jointly concluded there because I have going out with clients and going
it's higher for you
personally,
than the average,
right? Because there's some business expense in there as well. So typically higher, typically it's not going to be that amount. But if we end up going to a networking event, and say we go to a networking event and hors d'oeuvres are included, or something at the ticket price, that is something that I would have bought that ticket through my entertainment category, which then lowers my weekly grocery bill. And so there's these constant moving variables that play into your budget so that it's never going to be clean and easy. It's always going to be messy. The point of the matter is just like your bedroom is going to always have messy periods of time. Your bed is not constantly made. You get in it, you wake up. If you don't make that bed every single day, your bed is going to become a mess. And your bedroom is going to become a mess because you're not making the bed, so you're not worried about the sock that's there. And then eventually you have 10 socks and your underwear and different clothes strung all out around the room. And it's a giant mess. And now you have to take a whole day just to vacuum and organize and dust and take care of all these things that otherwise would have taken you a 10-minute routine in the morning to be able to get to a clean slate every single day. And doing the budget work every single pay period allows you to do that, where you're effectively just remaking your bed, getting yourself to a clean slate so that you don't have to take a ton of sacrifices for a longer period of time in order to get yourself back to zero or back to a clean bed.
All right. So what I'm hearing, obviously a budget's important. And like you just said, little steps a day, like it makes sense. Don't let things pile up over time and then explode. Like just do, because it can sound like a lot, but do a little each day. So with everything you said, do you have, I know everyone's is different, but do you have like key categories? Are you using Excel? Like what's the quickest, easiest way to just build out a budget so you can do it?
The quickest, easiest way is, it's kind of a hack, but the quickest, easiest way is, and we'll jump into talking about credit cards next because I don't want to just give somebody the free for all to use credit cards appropriately, but credit cards used properly are a great tool and give you some risk management there as well. But the easiest way is know your major expenses that cannot be put on a credit card. So your rent, your car payment, those are going to be your major two, your rent and your car payment. So take your total income, subtract out what can't be put onto a credit card. Those are typically going to be fixed withdrawals or fixed checks that you're writing each month. Most people, it's going to be withdrawals, but I get many clients that actually still write checks because they don't want automatic withdrawals. So find out what that number is. If we're using the same client at $4,000 a month, $1,000 in rent, $500 in a car payment, and that includes his insurance, you're looking at, what is that, $2,500. Now, if you know that you're going to max out your Roth IRA contributions, and so you're going to put $550 into a Roth IRA each month, we'll round that down to 500 just for easy numbers. You're at $2,000. You're funding your retirement. Your $4,000 you're also contributing to your work, but you did that before the $4,000, so that's already taken out of that. So we'll assume that you're appropriately funding your retirement. You now have $1,500 a month that you can spend on groceries, eating out, friends, vacations, whatever the case may be. So now the hack is, if you don't want to keep track of all of that, have one credit card that is your monthly expense credit card. And you watch that balance and you check it every day, every other day, and you make sure that that balance never goes over $1,500, or if you're paid bi-weekly, $750. If you're paid weekly, it's $375. So you make sure it never goes over that amount. And even if you're paid bi-weekly, you probably should know the $375 number so you can stay on track and know that, okay, I'm getting close, I'm not getting close. And what that allows you to do is, instead of trying to track every single category, you can now track a single number.
Yep.
And you don't have to get into the tedious stuff. You're tracking the single number for what'll typically be 50 to 60% of most people's expenses. And the other, 40 to 50% of people's expenses will be those fixed expenses that they have to come out anyways and consistently. And those are the things that if you weren't paying them, you'd fall behind. And now you're looking at losing your car, losing your house, all of those sorts of things. So those want to be your top line priorities on those, and then you'll be able to build out the other elements of it. But that, I would say, is the quickest and easiest way to do it. The problem with that is that because it's quick and easy, we get back to the easier and quicker it is, the easier and quicker it is to lose it. You still need to have your budget. You still need to know what that number is. And when you get a pay raise or your pay fluctuates, you need to adjust that number every single pay period.
All right, that makes sense. So write out, even if you want to go old school, pen and paper, biggest expense that you write checks or automatic withdrawals from. And then I actually like that method because it's easier now than ever with the apps. I mean, you check your credit card statement within 2 seconds of just signing into your app. So like you said, if you have a $1,500, I mean, that's big. But if you have a $1,500 budget and you're breaking it down weekly, like that's easy. Just check the app every day towards the end of the week. Okay, I'm at $300. I got 70, and then you don't have to, like you said, that gives you a lot of freedom of, I'm not pulling from entertainment. I'm not pulling from, like, you don't have to categorize things. And I like that you categorize it. I'm probably in that more middle boat too. Like I like to be pretty specific, but I think, there's a lot of times also where I'd probably just like to be like, okay, I just have this amount to spend. And if I don't, great. Like I'll dock it away in savings, but I won't delegate what I'm going to spend it on.
Right. So it gives you that flexibility. And that $1,500 definitely sounds like a large number, but you got to remember, all we took out of that was rent and car.
Yeah.
You still have your phone bill. You still have your health insurance if it's not through work. You still have your utility bill, internet. There's a lot of expenses that are going into that number. So that $1,500 is going to get depleted pretty quickly just from normal living expenses that we didn't categorize out. But a lot of those can be put onto a credit card. And so it allows you to just focus in on one number and track it. Now, I also said that I like credit cards and I like it if it's used properly because there's risk management there. The risk management element is cybersecurity, cyber fraud. I mean, it's through the roof right now. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people are being scammed out of their money. And a lot of that is through getting banking information, getting credit card information, checking account information, all of that, and being able to have access to those. Most credit cards give you a high level of security on that and protection where if you get hacked, your credit card information stolen, you can dispute a charge. They'll reverse the charge. You're not going to have to end up paying for it. And now you just have to get a new credit card in the mail and then go back to life as normal, assuming that they didn't get other information. Now, if you do the same situation with a checking account or a savings account, any traditional banking account, the vast majority of banks aren't going to reverse that transaction. They're going to say, okay, we need to freeze your account. We need to send you a new card and we need to look into this, but it's not going to be reversed. You're going to pay that money and you're not going to get it returned to you. So that's one of the major reasons why I like credit cards. But there's two major elements that you need to be concerned about with credit cards. The payment date and the closing date of the statement. If you worry about and know those two key components, your interest rate does not matter because your interest rate should not ever be coming into effect. Ever. Like you should not be paying credit card interest. It should not be occurring. If you did that, it's because you're not balancing your budget properly. And if you're in a situation where you're going to be paying credit card interest, you need to look at your budget, cut back some expenses, and attack that credit card aggressively because it's going to cause massive financial problems for you when you're looking at credit cards that are a really good rate is like 15, 16%. Most of them are 22, 23, 24%. And at those rates, it's going to be very hard for you to pay down that principal, especially if you were in a position where you needed to use the credit to begin with and you had to use the credit in order to buy whatever you were going to buy. That meant that you were in a deficit on your budget. So getting back out of that is going to be even harder in the following months. The key component here that you want to focus on is paying the statement balance on or before the payment date and being aware of how just credit card billing works. So understanding that closing date is key, but recognizing that we do not pay credit card interest. We do not put ourselves in that position. It is the cancer of the financial world.
Yeah, they're such double-edged swords. I mean, some things from a non-financial person that helped me out. Like, I grew up with a family that never used credit cards, like scared of credit cards. They taught me how to save very well, but everything was a debit card. And it's not a plug for them. It's just I use Chase, as I know you do as well. And I've had I think once, maybe twice, where they did have to replace my card, but they're great about it. Like quick customer service. They do everything amazing. And I don't even realize, like you brought it up, that added security, because that is nice. They're not tapping into if all your money is in a savings account attached to a debit card, so that's huge. And they've been great. So I never have too much of a concern about that, which is nice. I also don't buy sketchy stuff on sketchy websites.
Right.
But so that's awesome. And then the other thing that's really helped me is I just use my credit card like a debit card. If the money's not in my bank account, it's not on my credit card. And that's just helped me in a sense of, because it feels like you could have this fake money sometimes and spend a lot. But that's really helped. And then the dates, they confuse me here and there, like what you said, there's the minimum, there's the statement. So what I did recently too, which was just another thing that helped me out, is I always pay it if I just log on, I see it, I pay it, but that's because I treat it like a debit card. But what helped too is, I think maybe this is newer or it's always been there. They introduced not automatic minimum payments, but automatic full statement payments as well. So like I set that up just because if it's weird, the less I spend, the less I check. So in case I miss something, it will just pay off the full balance.
Right. And you bring up a great point. Like as far as when I walk clients through, and I think I probably did this with you when we first got you on credit cards, the key things that I'm looking at and reviewing with credit card companies when I'm convincing or telling somebody that they should get a credit card is, if we've gotten to the point where we understand the value of the credit card, we understand how it's going to work, we know we're going to pay it off every single month. The next key element that we're going to look at is make sure that the credit card does not have an annual fee. Mm-hmm. There's a time and place for those credit cards, but if we're at the point of where we're just getting you into them and we're just talking about this, no annual fee. Credit cards, no annual fee is the key component there. Again, if we're doing it properly, we don't really care about the interest rate, so don't get caught up on that. Focus on no payments. Once we set up the account, we set up automatic full statement balance payments, so that if you forget, it's cleared out, or you're on vacation and you're out of the country, or you're just on vacation in general, you're not thinking about paying your bills, have it set up for auto payment.
Yeah.
I prefer to have, if you're using a net zero budget, you can have almost all of, if not all of, your billing set to auto payments. And then that way you're never falling behind and you're not having to spend energy thinking about remembering, tracking all of these due dates. You can just set it up so that you have auto payments. You have that logged as far as when they're going to come out, so you know that, and then you can just track your budget that way. And so it allows you the freedom and the flexibility if you structure it properly and if you use them properly. Credit cards can get you into a world of hurt and tons of problems if you abuse them. But if you use them like you're talking about, where you're not spending money that you don't have, you're using it similar to the way a debit card would be used, but you're doing it so that it's easier to track your budget, and you have the added security from all the cyber risks that are going on. If you're doing it for those two reasons, you're going to be in a good spot.
Well, what also sold me too, because like we said, the cybersecurity really just came up now. Like I think I always knew that in the back of my mind, but it was never a forefront thought. What really sold me and what sold my parents as well is if you're using it like a debit card and you're using it responsibly, it's also free money because of the cash back rewards. You know what I mean? So that was something to me in terms of, if I do this responsibly, I do this right, because I know someone else may think this because my parents thought this. Well, what's the difference if I just use my debit card? Well, I was like, well, you get a good amount of cash back over time if it's the main card you're using for all your expenses.
Right. Well, and even if we're talking about the Chase Freedom Unlimited, which is the primary card that both of you and I use, you're getting a 1.5% back. So you're essentially getting a 1.5% discount on everything that you buy with that card, as long as you pay that off. Now, a lot of people might be skeptical of how that works and not understand it. Ultimately, credit cards are happy to pay you that amount because they are making that money off of you using that at a business. So when you use your credit card at a business, there's a transaction fee that the business pays. And then in return for you using the card and generating revenue for Chase, they pay you 1.5%, which is a portion of that fee that they're charging the business. So they're just kicking that back to you. Now, ultimately, the credit card company does want you to eventually get into a position where you're paying them interest. But we do not want you in that situation. That is not beneficial.
Right.
The average individual, I recommend 2 credit cards once you know how to use them. And it's honestly because the second credit card you're not actually using. You use it, I always tell people, use it to buy a soda or, shouldn't be recommending soda, but use it to buy some sort of snack while you're shopping during the holiday season each year and pay it right off.
Yeah.
That's just so you have activity on it. But effectively, you're doing that so that they don't cancel the card because you're not using it, because that card becomes your emergency credit card. So you're going to have your 6-month savings and all of that, but have a card that you literally don't use for anything so that it is there, so that if you end up in a financial emergency and absolutely need to use it, you have something on you that you can use.
Just because you made me think of it, another benefit of keeping one open, I imagine, would be building credit. And then also, we don't want to close cards, right?
Correct. So you don't want to close cards because one of the components of your credit score is the length of your credit history. Now, the length of your credit history is calculated based off of the length of time that accounts have been open. So when you close an account, the time stops on that. So if you close a credit card and you've had that credit card for 5 years, now when they're calculating your credit length, your credit history length, that card is set at 5 years, and that goes into your average at 5 years. And so every month, as your other accounts are growing in age, this one isn't. This one's fixed at 5 years. So just continue to keep the card. And again, I have several cards that I used to get my credit started when I was in college. And I keep those active by simply buying something on them once a year so that they stay active and I have the account there. And then it allows me to continue to grow my credit length, the length of the history of the accounts.
Yeah, because for someone who hates clutter and is a minimalist, like, it's very hard. It was hard at first to wrap my head around that, because you'll see a lot of things. You'll see a lot of deals of Walmart, Target, open up a card and you get, and when you're holiday shopping, or they're really good deals. But then that always made me want to, like, okay, I'll open it, buy it, get the discount, close the card. But obviously you don't want to do that because,
right.
And I think
so
I've only done that
specific
once.
Scenario, you would have effectively, 2-3 month credit history that's on your window.
Yeah.
And that's terrible. Like, that is very bad.
I think I only did it once with Walmart, but like now I have my main one, my Chase one. I have an Amazon Whole Foods one that I just keep open. And then I do think my Freedom one is still open. And I actually, what I really found that I like is, just so you don't even forget to once a year buy something, I have like a couple subscriptions on that. So like Spotify. So every month it just gets
used. That's a good idea too. And if you have the automatic payments, you don't even have to think about it. As long as you're keeping your budget to know I am spending that money and keep track of what you are spending.
Yeah.
So no, that's a good way to balance it, and there comes a point where it might not make sense to keep them all open, but that's an individualized conversation that we should have and look at all of it. So again, everything that we talk about is a balanced and holistic view. We want to look at your credit report. We want to look at your financial position and determine, does it make sense to keep this open? Does it make sense to close it? How are we going to do this? And ultimately, the reason why I say it requires an individualized conversation is there are key components of your financial position that we need to take into consideration, but there's also the psychological and personal factors that we need to take into consideration. If you have 3 cards already and you habitually go into credit card debt, you are better off closing out accounts so that you don't have access to them than keeping them open in order to get a consistent growth and bump in your credit score. If you have a credit and a spending issue, I'd rather take, potentially a 10, 15 point hit on your credit score due to not increasing your length than take the 50, 100, 150 point hit from having your credit utilization through the roof because you're overusing your credit card.
Yeah, we always talk about, even if it doesn't make most sense in the immediate and it's best for the long term, that's the best option. Even if it's not on paper the most ideal solution, if it's the best solution for you at the moment, and then we'll learn those things.
Right. Exactly. We'll optimize over time, but we need to optimize for the current moment, not for who we want to be in the future.
Definitely. So just to recap quick, this is what I'm hearing. If I'm just starting out with this, it's great to create a budget, write out the big expenses like rent, car payment that you don't use a credit card or debit card for. Then ideally, and this is where it's important maybe to meet with someone, because we've talked about this before, like yourself, go over risk tolerance, learn the person's behavior. But if you're ready for a credit card, then use that for the rest of your budget, because there's a lot of benefits there as long as you don't do it poorly.
Right. Key component is have a budget, have it be a net zero budget. Yeah. If you want an easy route, use that credit card to know what the difference is in your budget of all the other areas that you're spending money that aren't key ticket items that have to come out of your account. Know what that number is, track that number. And while you brought up a good point of meeting with somebody and having somebody, that doesn't need to be somebody that you pay. It doesn't need to be a financial advisor, an accountability partner, whether that's your spouse, whether that's your best friend, somebody you can trust and pull the veil back and show your financial position to. Yeah. Make clear goals and targets with that person and have them have the right, give them the permission to give you a hard time if you're not meeting those targets. Definitely. You don't have to pay somebody for this entry-level budgeting stuff. If you feel that you need the expertise and the help, go to somebody. Have, a hack on this part is honestly a good life insurance salesman will sit down with you and create a budget with you. A good financial planner will sit down with you and create a budget with you in your intro meetings with them. Before you've bought anything, before you've paid for anything, they will do these things, or they'll make sure that you have one. And so developing a relationship with somebody in that space where eventually you most likely will need them allows you to start to develop that relationship and get the guidance and the assistance in order to get you into a good position. But my first and entry-level recommendation would be find an accountability partner, work with them. If you need to go that next step and you want to go to somebody that's more of an expert, find somebody that's in a sales position that in order for them to do their due diligence needs to present you with this and make sure that you already have it. And then that way you won't have to pay for it.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. The goal is to put the power into people's hands. And, we don't want to suggest things that only take, like there's a million things, health and financial, that do not require any cost that will make, exponential change. So absolutely. Thanks for listening to our podcast.
We hope this helps you on your balance freedom journey.
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below.
Until next time, stay balanced.